Lord, may the words of my mouth, may the meditations of all of our hearts be guided by your Spirit into your word this night. In your name I pray. Amen. Please be seated. If this is the end of our journey through Job, tonight is the summit. We've walked with Job through the ashes. We've listened to the silence. We've wrestled with questions that don't have answers. And now here we are at the end of Job. And Job gives us not an explanation, but he gives us a confession. Not a here's why this happened, but instead, here's who I trust. The most famous line from the book of Job begins with the saying, I know. Now, that's kind of striking if you think about it for these last few weeks, because there is a lot that Job does not know. He doesn't know about the heavenly conversation between Satan and God in chapters 1 and 2. He does not know why his children die. He does not know why his body is attacking him. He does not know why God seems to feel so far away. And if we're honest, in this series, in the conversations we've been having, we've been there too. We don't know why the suffering comes in waves, why prayers sometimes seem to echo back unanswered, why the righteous prosper, or why the righteous suffer, rather, and the wicked prosper. Well, why some stories end in healing and others end in loss. Like Job, we've lived in that tension. But here's the turning point. Job doesn't wait for answers before he speaks. He says, I know. Not because his circumstances have changed, but because his foundation has not changed. I know my Redeemer. That word matters. Job doesn't say a Redeemer exists, or there's a theological concept that God has given to us of a Redeemer. Somewhere out there, there's a Redeemer. No, my Redeemer. Personal, particular, relational. In the Old Testament, a redeemer wasn't just a helper. He was someone who was family, someone close. You remember the story of Ruth, and Ruth was looking for a redeemer, and that redeemer came in her relative, her kinsman redeemer by the name of Boaz, someone who stepped in when everything in life fell apart, to buy back that which was lost, to restore what was broken, to defend what has been threatened. And that's what makes Job's confession here so powerful. He is saying that even when everything else is gone, I still have him, and he has me. Now, on the other side of the resurrection, we know that Redeemer's name. It's Jesus. The fulfillment Job could only see dimly, we look back with certainty as an event that has happened in history. Our Redeemer, who didn't stay distant from suffering, who stepped into it, who had real skin that felt the lash of the whip, the weight of the cross, the piercing of the nails, the suffocating hours of that crucifixion. But unlike Job, Jesus did know why it was happening. For you. To redeem you. To buy you back. To restore you to the Father. He became the Redeemer, not just in theory, but the Redeemer in real flesh and blood. And that Redeemer, as even Job confessed thousands of years before that Redeemer would come in the Incarnation in a little town of Bethlehem, Job's convinced something else about that Redeemer. I know that my Redeemer lives. Lives. Not will live, not used to live, but lives. And so we see what Job was reaching toward. This is a resurrection hope and promise. A knowledge we look back and know Jesus didn't stay in the grave. He rose physically, bodily, truly. He was seen and touched and heard for 40 days. Even made some fish and chips on the shore of the Sea of Galilee for his disciples who were out for a terrible, horrible, no good day of fishing where they caught nothing until Jesus told them where they were. It's not just a sentiment. This is not, he lives in our hearts. This is really a reality. The tomb is empty. Death is defeated. Sin is forgiven. And because he lives, everything changes. But yet we need to come back down the mountain, back into real life. Because this isn't just Job's story, it's your story. Your long, dark night of the soul. Maybe it looks like a grief that doesn't go away. A diagnosis you didn't expect. A relationship that broke. Questions that still don't have answers. There's a story I know that sounds a lot like Job's. Real story of a man by the name of Horatio Spafford. Christian living in the late 1800s and had what many would have called a pretty good life. He was a successful lawyer in Chicago, had a wife and 4 daughters, but much of his wealth was tied up in real estate. And then like Job, everything began to unravel rather quickly. In 1871, the Great Chicago Fire happened, where it swept through the entire city. It destroyed much of his property, wiping out a lot of his hard-fought wealth. 2 years later, in the year 1873, his family decided they needed some rest, so Horatio planned a trip for all of them to go to Europe. But business delayed him, so he sent his wife, Anna, and their 4 daughters ahead of him. Midway across the Atlantic, tragedy struck. The ship collided with another vessel and sank in just 12 minutes. Anna, his wife's last memory, was holding on tightly to her daughters before she herself was knocked unconscious and they were swept away. All 4 daughters died. 12 days later, Horatio received a telegram from his wife with just 2 words: saved alone. I can hardly imagine that kind of grief. That kind of loss raises some of the same questions Job asked. Why? How could this happen? Where is God in this? Horatio did what you would have done. He immediately boarded a ship to go and to be with his wife. As he traveled across the ocean, passing near the place where his daughters had died, he couldn't sleep. But there in the darkness, in the grief, in the unanswered questions, God gave him words. Not answers, words. Words that have echoed down through generations of Christians who walk through their own long, dark journeys. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, what? It is well with my soul. How can a man say that? His circumstances didn't make sense. His pain didn't just disappear. But he could say that because he could join Job and say, I know. I know my Redeemer. I know my Redeemer lives. And that, dear friends, is the difference. Not that suffering is removed, but that even there, and especially there, we are not alone because our Redeemer lives. And here's what this final message from our series of Job as we approach Holy Week is giving you. Not explanations, but something better. A confession that you can make even in the darkest day of your life, even on the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad days. You can sit with Job in the ashes and you can say as well, I know, not because life makes sense, but because your Redeemer lives. And friends, that means you are not abandoned. Your suffering is not meaningless. Your future is not uncertain because your Redeemer walks with you now, holds you in his hands, and will raise you on the last day. And just like Job, you can have confidence that after your skin has been destroyed, yet in your flesh, you're going to see God. Yes, you are going to see him. And he gets the final word. Not suffering, not loss, not death, but God, face to face, alive. So that after everything that we've seen in Job, after all the questions, the pain, the wrestling, this is where we land. Not we understand everything, but we know who holds us. And that's enough. Because he lives. He redeems. He restores. And one day he's going to make it all new. I know my Redeemer lives. Amen. Please pray with me. Lord, haste the day when our faith will be sight, when the clouds will be rolled back like a scroll, when the trumpet shall sound, when you shall descend, so that even now we can say, it is well with our souls. When we do not have answers, when our questions are overwhelming, help us to know our Redeemer lives. And that is more than enough. Amen.